1808, the first edition. It was published in 5 parts. Also simultaneously, he was improving on his organon. So if you compare the first 4 successive editions of organon written in 1810, 1819, 1824 and 1829, and if you especially see the sections 39 to 61, you would find that Hahnemann was all the time struggling hard to reduce to order the vast chronic mass of facts concerning diseases. He weighed every sort of classification of disease in balance and found each of them wanting. So in his organon, you would find basically 3 kinds of classification of diseases. One is the therapeutic classification. The other is the causative classification. And the third is the clinical classification of diseases. And if you want to know about this in detail, you would have to again go to my Modus Foundation and Prescriber courses, wherein I have described the whole skeleton of Hahnemann's organon and how he was struggling to find different classification. And in the end, in the organon edition number 5, he gave these 3 classification, and it is mind-boggling how correct he was, how precise he was in his classification of disease. Now his realistic mind was always for concepts and abhorred abstractions, which the nosological classification of diseases afforded in his time. He came to the conclusion that nature has no nomenclature or classification of disease. She produces single diseases. This he writes in section 46 of the first edition of the organon, and he retained this up till the 3rd edition of the organon until he came up with his own 3 classification of diseases. But about some diseases, Hahnemann was not so sure. As they were so fixed in their character and course, they might have been caused by a peculiar contagion, a peculiar miasm as it was named by Hahnemann. He told whatever diseases he thought were because of some kind of infectious contagion, he called them miasm of tolerably fixed character, example plague, smallpox, etc. And it was in the cholera epidemic that he finally told us that cholera is because of a contagion, a miasmatic principle so small that it cannot be seen by the eyes, but it is spread through it, and it is found in the Asiatic plain of Ganges. And this was before John Snow, about 50 years before John Snow could discern that water is the cause of spread of cholera. So I consider Hahnemann as the father of epidemiology also. He is a father of a certain giving name to microbes. He is father of microbiology for me. So he says that each of them can have a peculiar name because these are contagions of fixed character. Though we find Hahnemann constantly busy in developing the knowledge of drugs and perfecting the art of therapeutics, there was no time when his mind was not occupied with the knowledge of disease and how to improve that knowledge of disease. That is why the main changes in the successive editions of Organon deal with many of conceptions about the vital force and about the causative factors of disease. In the first 3 editions of Organon, we come across the word miasm. And in the first three, you must understand this very, very clearly, that in the first three editions of the Organon, when Hahnemann is using the word miasm, it is used in the accepted sense of the era, and its precise connotation and denotation has not yet been fixed by Hahnemann. Now here, for us, people who do not understand English as well as other people do, I must tell you that what connotation and what denotation is. Now blue is a color. If I say blue, color strikes into your mind. Now this is a denotation. Now if you attach an emotion to that color, and if you say that I am feeling blue, another picture emerges into your thought process, and that is that this person is sad. Now this is connotation. When an emotion, a symbol, a symptom, a group of symptom is added or defined with a accepted term, like blue is the color, but I am feeling blue is that you are sad. So Hahnemann, after finishing the third organon, and when he was writing the fourth organon, by that time he was very clear about his own miasma theory. And his miasma theory goes beyond the accepted terminology of that era. That is why Staff and Gross could not understand what Hahnemann was trying to say. Because in that era, during Hahnemann's time, all the morbific agents were designated by a general term miasma or miasmata, which literally meant any noxious emanation of effluvia or a polluting factor. There was no fixed connection, or there was no fixed connotation or denotation attached to the term miasma. But Hahnemann did it. Hahnemann was the first to perceive and teach the parasitical nature of contagious disease. Examples: smallpox, chickenpox, measles, scarlet fever, etc. It was before Koch's time. Most of the acute diseases of epidemic and sporadic character depended upon contagium vivum, as Hahnemann named them, contagium vivum, though he made it explicit in his article on cholera in 1831. He must have arrived into this idea before 1827, when he expressed his views on chronic disease to his two disciples before publishing his book on chronic disease in 1828. If we read between the lines of chronic diseases, it is evident even for a casual reader how he based his arguments on the notion of acute miasm, which he had arrived at previously while working on epidemics. He arrived at the final conclusion about the nature of miasmatic conception through these steps of thinking, through which I am going to guide you. First, he came to a definite idea about the biological agents being causally related to acute diseases. Secondly, he was able to show the analog between the mode of onset and development of acute as well as chronic disease. Thirdly, he established the contagious nature of chronic diseases during one phase of their development in the human organism. The possibility of transmission of those disease factors through successive generations was established through Hahnemann's marvelous collection of facts from the earliest possible his own recorded case histories and histories of other people. So from all these observations, he could assert the causative factors of chronic disease as being of miasmatic nature, with the same conception of miasm which he attached to the relation of acute disease. Like acute diseases were caused by miasm of fixed, tolerably fixed character, similarly chronic disease were caused by miasm which have long-term pollution of the vital force. That is why after much deliberation and prolonged observation, Hahnemann added the following line in the section 72 of the Organon, 5th edition. They, that is the chronic diseases, are caused by dynamic infection with a miasm. Now there is a division here between two lines of thinking in homeopathy. One line of thinking in homeopathy, one stream of thinking only highlights the word infection with a miasm, and they start thinking about pathological infections like Margaret Taylor and similar doctors of that era. But Hahnemann was not speaking about infection. He was speaking about dynamic infection. Infection is something which is injected. It is kind of an injection of a dynamic, unknown, vitalizing principle into the vital force. This is what Hahnemann meant when he conceptualized miasma. Now, Hering, when Hering learned about miasma theory, he said it is not required to know what miasma is. It is not important to know what miasma is until and unless you have in command all the tools that are required to cure people, all the homeopathic tools that are required that the master has given us. And as long as you select the most similar medicine possible, the study of miasma is useless. On the other hand, Allen gave a very apt reply to Hering, and he started from where Hering left. And Allen says, and I quote, the last line is well timed, so long as he selects the most similar medicine possible. This is what Hering has written, no? So long as he selects the most similar medicine possible. And Allen says, the fact is, we cannot select the most similar remedy possible until we understand the phenomena of active and latent. So the true similia is always based upon the existing basic miasm, whether we be conscious or unconscious of the fact. We should know not only the name of the underlying principle that fathers the phenomena with which we are so diligently contending and combating. Now this is the difference between an intelligent warfare and fighting in the dark. This is what Allen says. And he further says, in our study of miasmatics, we are brought into a closer relation with the nature and cause of the disease. Indeed, the disease becomes no longer a mystery but a clear problem. It is a problem of chess. It becomes a clear problem which is to be solved by a careful study of the phenomena that each case presents. Each case being a distinct and separate study in itself. So Allen was into the right track, into the right spirit of cononation of miasma that Hahnemann was talking about. While Hering, Margaret Taylor, etc., either they rejected or they followed the pathologic theory of miasma, which was wrong. Our cures are not made, this is what Allen is saying, our cures are not made through the application of our therapeutics to a nomenclature of a disease, but to a classical grouping of all the phenomena therein presented, and that which we see is often not seen by physicians who has no knowledge of the miasmatic. Like somebody comes into my clinical study and a patient is talking to me about different things. And once I get to know and get to understand the miasma, I suddenly ask him, do you have dreams of water? And the patient is zapped. And the patient says, how do you know? And I say, I know because I know your phenomena. A phenomena, the psychotic phenomena of disease. The patients are going to have dreams of water, dreams of carousing, of meals, different. The tubercular miasma phenomena is the person is going to have dreams of wandering. So you see, if you understand miasma, and if you are well versed with miasma, you can see miasma on the face. It's written on the face. We are going to talk about it later on. If we fail to understand the miasmatic phenomena and the relation they bear to each other and also to the life force, we fail to select the true basic remedy. In order to arrest, this is all what Allen is telling you. In order to arrest pathological developments or processes, we must search for the basic miasmatic symptoms in each case. In sequel to acute diseases, this of course becomes necessary if we take into consideration the chronic miasmatic process that was cooperative with the acute disease. Then we not only arrest the whole process, but we also shorten the disease period and the suffering of our patients. It is what Hahnemann has told you in his organelle, that after the acute disease is over, after the storm is over, you have to give a deep acting antisoric medicine or any other miasmatic medicine. Like in this COVID phenomena, we are seeing that once the COVID is over and the patient is not rallying and the patient is not completely getting well, a dose of tuberculinum is going to do wonder. And we have tried tuberculinum when the patient is not rallying well after acute phase of COVID is over, and tuberculinum does wonders. In cases which do not yield to treatment, even in those cases, you would have to look out for blocks to cure. And for looking out for blocks to cure, you must understand what a basic miasma is. Then only you know that miasma can be a block to cure. Now, what Kent has to say on miasma. Now, Kent was also following Hahnemann's stream of the dynamic nature of miasma. The nature of these causes must be kept in view. This is what Kent says. Remember, these chronic miasma are present in the internal state and after an acute illness very often have to be fought, because acute illness sometimes and many a times or most of the time ignites the internal miasma, so which was latent, so it becomes active. So you would have to fight that. If this is not known, many patients will gradually sink and die for apparent want of vitality to convalescence. Now, what is the relevance of miasma theory in clinical practice? Miasma go beyond the infectious disease they are associated with. They indicate a greater pattern, giving a more complete picture of the nature of the disease and the prognosis. Recognizing miasmatic patterns in a person's disease process will aid in the search of similimum. If you understand that the patient has an active psychotic miasma, you are going to select first the medicine which is antipsychotic and not antisoric, and therefore you are going to avoid unnecessary aggravations. To sum all this up, in the course of his clinical work, Hahnemann noticed that there were certain chronic conditions that he could not treat satisfactorily with homeopathy because the patients came back again and again with a different set of symptom complex. He searched for an explanation of why certain persons were not cured after repetition of the similimum. He noticed in some cases that after each dose of a well-chosen remedy, there was less and less of response. He concluded that it was not due to a failure of the method of homeopathy, but that he had not solved the question of the chronic diseases. And Hahnemann wrote that this question constantly occupied his mind for 12 years from 1816 to 1828. The result of his thinking were contained in his major treatise, The Chronic Disease, which he wrote from 1828 to 1830 and developed further in the second edition written between 1835 and 1839. Chronic Disease, the book, consists of 5 volumes. The first being purely theoretical, in which Hahnemann outlines his miasma theory and its relevance to the treatment of chronic disease. The remaining 4 volumes are practical and contain detailed description of number of remedy pictures. Hahnemann's basic chronic miasm, wherein the word miasm comes from the Greek word meaning polluting or staining. Miasma theory, as I have told you before, was one of the theories of the cause of disease prevailing in the 18th and 19th century, but Hahnemann gave it a different meaning. At the time Hahnemann, you must remember this, at the time when Hahnemann formulated his theory, there was no knowledge of infection or microbiological terms. So Hahnemann postulated that there were 3 distinct miasms: the venereal, the psychosis, and syphilis, which were the venereal miasm, and sora, which was the non-venereal miasmatic disease. Syphilis was a condition which was clearly identified as contagious even in Hahnemann's own time, and using these labels for his miasmatic traits, Hahnemann clearly implied that chronic disease had its genesis in contagion or person-to-person transmission. Moreover, by applying rational theory to the manifestations which we now attribute to different stages of infections, Hahnemann reasoned that the miasmatic influence eventually affects the whole organism, ultimately giving rise to a skin eruption after the miasm has penetrated the entire body. He associated each of the 3 miasms with the characteristic skin manifestations: sora with eruption, vesicle, tetter, tinea, itch, etc., psychosis with figwort, and syphilis with chancre. But was it only these points that Hahnemann told us? No. Hahnemann believed sora to be the main cause of chronic disease, making up 7/8 of total incidence, which means that non-venereal chronic diseases, which are because of, I must tell you here, which are because of altered immune response, are 7/8 chronic diseases. And only 1/8 are being caused by sexually transmitted psychosis or syphilis. In his time, what he called was the venereal disease. In our time, we'll call them as infectious diseases. So 1/8 of chronic diseases are because of infectious diseases, and 7/8 are because of altered immune response, the so-called non-venereal chronic disease. So now you can correlate miasma theory to our present science. He considered sora to be the oldest miasm, dating back to antiquity, where it manifested itself as scabies. So every case of scabies is not sora, you know. During the Middle Ages, as he postulated, that it became more aggressive in the form of leprosy and became milder again because of suppression, as to present as internal itch diathesis, which was outwardly typified by a itching vesicle or a tetter. Now, the Hebrew word soat means a groove, a fault or stigma, and this is what Hahnemann meant when he went miasma as a fault in the vital force, the healthy vital force, a stigma on the vital force. Now, this was a term often applied to lepers and to those affected during the Great Plagues, and conveys what Hahnemann had in mind. Now, complicating this model was a combination of 1 or 2 miasms, which made treatment very difficult and rendered certain cases incurable. Hahnemann tells us when the miasmas are combined, then they become difficult to cure. He considered that these miasmatic conditions were curable only as long as the local reactions were still present. Alternatively, progress could be achieved if skin eruptions could be evoked again in the course of treatment. And I see in my study of homeopathy of and in treatment of chronic disease that all my cases which are chronic in nature, they at one point of time express with some kind of eruption or some kind of itch if we watch closely. And as that itch comes, I know this patient is curable and completely curable. In the organ, Heinemann suggests that miasma lurk inside body and can be activated by several of factors to derange health in a peculiar and a particular form of a chronic disease. This was a simple but a brilliant working model considering the era of scientific darkness he lived in. He could, by his mind, divide two kind of chronic diseases: the non-venereal, the non-infectious, and the infectious diseases. Although he could not give the name infectious because that terminology and the germ theory of disease was not present in Hahnemann's time. So, Sora in Hebrew is groove, fault, stigma. Hahnemann called it as the hydra-headed monster. You know who Hydra was? Hydra was, if you've seen the movie Hercules, Hydra was a disease causing a monster, a female monster with the hair of snakes. And each, snake, if you cut that snake, the head of that snake, another one would pop up. So Hydra, he called Sora as the hydra-headed monster, meaning if you cure one manifestation of the disease, the other pops up after several days or several years. But he also called Sora as the fundamental cause of chronic disease, of all chronic disease, including psychosis and syphilis. Beautiful, isn't it? He could discern that infectious disease are also going to cause harm only because of altered immune response. It is beautiful what Hahnemann thought 200 years ago. And he then told us that the main presentation of Sora is itch and sometimes eruptions. Itch plus minus eruption. Psychosis he associated with gonorrhea, but it was not gonorrhea per se, but internal gonorrhea, the internal stigmata of gonorrhea. The main presentation of this internal stigmata of gonorrhea were condylomata and gleat. He associated syphilitic miasm with syphilis, but his syphilitic miasm did not mean syphilis, the disease. It meant internal dynamic infection of syphilis to the vital force, deranging the vital force in causing an array of chronic diseases. The main presentation of syphilis being ulcer and bubo. We only remember one part, ulcer, condylomata, itch, but it was itch and eruption in case of Sora. In case of gonorrhea, it is gleat and condylomata. In case of syphilis, it is ulcer and bubo. Now this is all that we are going to talk about while we are talking about.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but we are running out of time, so it will be great if you could,
I think it is time to quit right now, and let us take some questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Enlightening session. Please, learners, Dr. Nigam is ready for your questions. Comment in this chat box with your questions now, and the people who are watching on YouTube, they can also comment there, and we'll take up their questions as well. And we'll start it in a minute. And sir, until they are doing so, the learners are typing their questions. Please do a few words about the course that we have done at DISW for the people who don't know about it.
Okay, the course that we have done, we are trying to, at least I am trying to update homeopathy to the modern scientific level. In the next sessions, when we are going to talk about miasma, we are going to understand how miasma theory in its dynamic form evolved from Hahnemann to Kent from Hahnemann to Allen to Kent, then to Roberts, then to Julian, then to Ortega and Paschiro, then to Julian, then to me. In between you have Shankaran also. But in my approach to miasma, I have tried to study the whole of miasma with a very scientific view, understanding that miasma has other connotations. It has a connotation towards the facial symmetry, the form, towards the anabolism, towards the catabolic processes. But I have tried to study miasma through immunity since 1998. I wrote my first paper of immunity and homeopathy in 1998. Therein I have been perfecting this, and after perfecting this I came up with this book of miasma, The Road Less Travelled. I would urge my readers to buy this and study this. This would guide you to from miasma as envisaged by Hahnemann to miasma as we must envisage it now with the scientific knowledge of the infectious microbes, with the knowledge of immunity, etc. And I'll slowly take you towards immunity and understanding of miasma through immunity. I would also like to tell you other things, and in our course we have told everything. Once you understand what miasma as per immunity is, you would very clearly understand the phenomena of suppression of disease, the phenomena of elimination, the scientific value of Hering's law, the scientific value of different laws that we have. And this we have presented in our course. And after you finish our course, I am sure you would be a confident prescriber of medicines, homeopathic medicines. You would be able to take care of miasma in complex diseases, in chronic diseases. You will be curing like this the acute diseases. You would also learn the limitations of homeopathy. You would also learn how to go about a consultation, how to do a follow-up, how to select a practical potency. This is all we have tried to do. So what I have tried to do is, in our foundation course, I have tried to make your foundation strong so that you can understand what I am trying to say in my prescriber course, so that you can become a confident prescriber of today's time. A confident prescriber of today's time must have a laptop. He must be versed with a computer, and he must repertorize every case as Kent has told so. And you would see the results are predictable. Everything is so clear cut and predictable if you follow Hahnemannian and Kentian thought. And you adapt it to the modern science of today. And this is what I've tried to do. This has been my life's work. This was the work that was entrusted to me by my father and his teacher, the great Dr. Twentyman. And if you there have been in the last session, there was one query about the essence of vital force. Somebody was asking to me about the essence of vital force. Now we have been swayed and dismayed and taken to a wrong direction by the word essence. The word essence, the spirit of homeopathy, is for the highest level of prescribers of homeopathy. It is not for the beginners. And I am more interested in teaching the beginners and the middle ones. The beginner of homeopathy must repertorize every case, do a mathematical repertorization. The second stage of homeopathy only opens up to your eyes when your mind opens to the true concept of miasma. Then you have graduated into the second stage of homeopathy. And thereafter, after many years, you reach the third stage of homeopathy. That is the spiritual or homeopathy, the highest form of homeopathy. Then you would understand the idea of essence, the idea of the spirit of homeopathy, etc., etc. So, any questions, Dr. Ria?
Yes, sir. We we are started with questions. Before taking up them, let me just tell my learners that THJ has come up with an offer of 30% off. They can use the code FT30 on our website www.thehomeopathic.academy.com and enroll in your course and get all the wisdom that they need. So another important thing that this webinar overview of miasma theory will be taken up in multiple number of sessions with Dr. Nigam, as Dr. Nigam has told me earlier. So this being the part one of it, so stay tuned with us for further sessions and further parts.
Now somebody, Dr. Ria has asked which software can we use for repertorization. It was in 1999 that my father gifted me with a computer. My father was a visionary in homeopathy and he gifted me a computer. He attended a conference in 1977 in Belgium and he came, and then he could realize what is the next step of homeopathy. In 1977 he realized that. We had computer here in our study in 1998 and I started using, I was one of the first buyer of Radar when it was launched in India, and since then I've been using Radar, and Radar for me is the most satisfactory, although I'm not very happy with the latest version of Radar. But as a repertory I would say Synthesis version 7 is the best, because it has all the additions from all the great past masters, leaving about all the new kind of wannabe masters. So the version of Synthesis and Radar wherein you have repertories from Hahnemann till Julian is the best version, and this is what I use in my clinic. I am not happy with way Materia Medica is being studied right now, like the Materia Medica of carcinosin. Materia Medica of carcinosin is only in our head. It has not been proven. It was tried, but it has not been classically proven. So whatever the Materia Medica of carcinosin we have, and I have written in detail about the Materia Medica of carcinosin in this book, but it is all through observation and not through homeopathic pathogenetic trials, the HPTs. So that is the problem.
Yes, so let's take up another question. A learner wants to know, can you please briefly explain what is miasmatic prescribing and miasmatic treatment?
Okay, that's very good. Miasmatic prescribing is two things. If you are approaching a case, say a chronic case, which is complicated by several miasma, say all the three miasma. Now what you would have to do, you would have to first discern after taking the history that which is the active miasma. I'll give you an example. If somebody, and you would see people coming to you in your clinic, somebody comes to your clinic who's obese, who has acanthosis on his neck, which means melasma on the neck, then melasma on the forehead, melasma on his cheeks, dark circles around the eye, waxy and greasy skin, multiple warts on the neck and axilla. Although they are not warts, they are DPNs, but you take them as warts because they are outgrowths. You immediately know that the active miasma here is psychotic miasma. So when you are going to repertorize, you would find 4 or 5 remedies after repertorization. You are going to choose the antipsychotic medicine. Now this is miasmatic treatment. Your first medicine has to be antipsychotic. And once you give antipsychotic remedy and wait and watch, you would see retrograde metamorphosis of the disease. We are going to talk about retrograde metamorphosis of the disease, how it happens. And then you would see, say after some time you would see that the patient comes to you and says that I have had a bout of tonsils. And when you check his mouth and you see that there are ulcers on his tonsils. Now what is this? And he's salivating more. What is this? Now this is retrograde metamorphosis. The psychotic miasma has settled down and the syphilitic miasma has come up. And now you choose, say, Marxol as antisyphilitic, if it is indicated by the symptoms, the new symptoms that have cropped up. Now you settle down the syphilitic miasma. Then maybe after some time he comes back and tells you that I have an eruption, which is very itchy. It's kind of eczematous, it's kind of dermatitis, and now you know that you've reached the root of the disease. Psora has come up. Now this was called as layered prescribing. This was done by Hahnemann himself. In his organon you would find that he says that all the non-venereal chronic diseases, they cannot be cured by a single medicine but by a series of medicines. And this is what he meant. So he knew how to treat case miasmatically. We have to learn, and I would make sure that you learn how to take case miasmatically and how to treat a case miasmatically. Then miasma are also very important in layered prescribing. When you attend my course, prescriber course, you come to know what layered prescribing is. In today's clinical scenario, you have to be a master of layered prescribing to cure your cases. Simple cases do not come to you anymore. Mostly they are complicated cases, and they are mostly complicated by another miasm, which was later named by Kent, the drug miasm, because they have been taking so many poisonous drugs in the name of allopathy that the side effects of those drugs, they have complicated the case. So layered prescribing of Burnett, Isiaga, Paschereau and Nigam is going to help you. Oh yes, Shipra Mishra is asking about the psychological abnormalities. In the next session, when we are going to talk about evolution of miasmatic theory after Hahnemann, we are going to take up initial traits of the psychological abnormalities of different miasma. I can tell you very simply that psoric people, when the psoric miasma is predominant, these people are restless. They are restless. In the psychotic miasma, although there is a book, a small book in vogue nowadays, written by Vijay, where they say that, written by Farooq J. Master, a psychotic shame. But you know, shame is not the hallmark of psychosis. The hallmark of psychosis is jealousy and quarrelsomeness. The psychotic people are jealous people, they are quarrelsome people. This is predominant, and they also, when they break down, they have an element of shame. Then in syphilitic, the syphilitic people are, the syphilitic miasma, when it is active in the mind becomes destructive mind. And if you study these facial characteristic of criminals, you would see predominantly all the criminals have phthoric typology. They have crooked teeth, they have crooked nose. You would see that. So miasma can be seen from the face. You can see it on the face. You can see a psoric face. If you learn to know, if your mind learns to know how to see a psoric face, you see a psoric face. You see a psychotic face. You see a syphilitic face. You see a canceric face. And I'm going to tell you in later sessions how to recognize miasma through face only, through physical characteristics only. Through symptoms, you are going to get to know which miasma is more active. So you would first have to understand what is active miasma and what is latent miasma.
Thank you, sir. Another learner wants to know, can we prescribe tuberculinum in active stage as well?
No, never do it. You have to study two people. If you want to study how to use tuberculinum, you have to study Clark, and you would have to study Burnett in the use of bacillinum, which is a small booklet that he has written, and then you would have to also study Boric. In Boric, tuberculinum in the later stages. He has given you when to use tuberculinum and when not to. In an active stage of tuberculosis, using tuberculinum is very harmful. It can lead to unnecessary aggravation. But using another tuberculinum nosode by the name of tuberculinum aviare or aviare. If you are thinking about using a nosode tuberculinum in an active case of tuberculosis, do not give tuberculinum bovinum Kent. Do not give tuberculinum residuum, but give tuberculinum aviare. Now again, if you want to know what is the difference between all these three, you would have to go through this book. This book has everything on miasma written till now.
Thank you, sir. Another learner wants to know, while reading any single medicine, how to relate the miasm, as same symptoms are given in more than one miasm.
Very good. Like calcarea carb. Calcarea carb is a psoric remedy, anti-psoric remedy. It is an anti-psychotic remedy. It is also antisyphilitic, but it can act on multiple miasma. You see, so when you are studying a materia medica, try to do not cram it up. You must remember that Kent was the person who said first that you cannot remember materia medica. You can only remember a drug picture. Try to make a picture of that materia medica in your mind, and when you sit with a clinical master, you would see those pictures walking into your clinic. And when you are going to study Kent's materia medica, you would find in each remedy different pictures, disease state pictures, and it is wonderful. And what Vittelkus has done, what he has done, he has taken that idea forward, but he has named it as essences. Vittelkus has only served you an old wine with a new name and a new arrangement. His book of essences is basically taken from Kent's lecture notes. So read Kent's lecture notes. They are the best in putting into your mind a picture of a remedy, and you would see those remedies walking in. We are planning some video sessions also of cases wherein I would show you the cases. I can show you, I have recorded cases of a tuberculinum case wherein you would, once you read tuberculinum and once you study that case, you would see it is copybook.
Thank you, sir. We are looking forward to see that. So another learner wants to know, is SORA present in every individual as it is a fundamental miasm along with other miasms?
Yeah. Today, at this point of time, when we have crossed several generations of humanity, and you see, Hahnemann has told us already that SORA has changed over the time. So what he's trying to tell you is, forget SORA. Forget SORA, the fundamental disease, and think about immunity. Now your immune system, how does it develop? It develops via the genetically, the genes provided to you by your parents. Right? And it also develops because of the external antigens that come into your system. So Hahnemann was bang right. But he did not know the name immunity, no? So, immune system has changed over the years. It is constantly evolving. Why COVID is a threat now? Because this is a new thing. Our immune system does not know about it. But our immune system now knows about gonorrhea and non-gonococcal microbes. So what happens when non-gonococcal microbes, they enter, or gonorrhea enters, you have a set reaction. So these we all are sick now. We all have a sick immune system inside us. It is our phenotype, and this phenotype, this sick system, is made healthy by our vital force, by making different systems into balances. But once we have some kind of disruption, some kind of shock, some kind of stressor. Say we have heard, about the suicide of this film actor Sushant Singh Rajput, and so many people have become depressed. I have had about 10 to 12 cases of acute depression coming into my clinic, and they have become sick. They were healthy before. Listening to that news only, seeing that photograph on the Facebook, they have fallen sick. Why? Because they were sick. Vital force was keeping them in health by balancing those systems. But because of that news, vital force got disturbed, and the sickness in the form of symptom complex presented to me.
Thank you, sir. Because we're running out of time, we won't be able to take any more questions. So just for the learners to know again, Dr. Harsh Nigam's course with THA is named Modus Foundation and Modus Prescriber. You can visit our website www.thehomeopathic.academy.com and find all the details over there. And we have an offer of 30% off going on, so you can, get yourself enrolled. And let's wind up here, sir, if you'll allow me.
Can I say something before you wind up?
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Whenever Dr. Ria is talking about 30% off, etc., etc., I am always reminded of a couplet by Ghalib. And Ghalib has written once, मुफ्त हाथ आए गालिब तो बुरा क्या है. तो 30% ऑफ पे अगर डॉक्टर निगम आपके हाथ आ रहे हैं तो बुरा क्या है.
बिल्कुल, sir. बिल्कुल.
Right.
बहुत अच्छी deal है.
Not a bad deal. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, viewers, so I'll take off, and I'm signing off now. Next time we are going to study about the evolution of the theory of miasma after Hahnemann, from Hahnemann's time till my time. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Looking forward. Thank you so much. Thank you all the learners for being here. We'll inform you about the next part of this session very soon, and we'll let you know. Also, to inform our learners, we have an upcoming webinar by Dr. Akshay Swami scheduled for 21st of August. You will soon receive the link for registration in your mail. And we have, THA has a special course by Dr. Frederick Schroyen, 4 ways to rejuvenate your practice, which will help you learn how to better your practice, how to better your repertorization, and you can go on our website and pre-book it and have a 40% off on it. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the homeopathic fraternity who joined us here today. And thank you to THA for making this webinar.